Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you all for joining us for today's last episode in our Holiday Health webinar series. Today, we're going to be presenting 5-minute methods of managing your mental health for the new year and beyond. As the holiday season upon us, this time can be stressful for many, but mindful planning and setting realistic expectations can help the holidays be more enjoyable. I want to welcome the L medical team to share guidance to help you focus on a positive outlook and helpful methods to manage your mental health during the holidays. So I'll hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Marie. And I'm Taylor Newen with L Medical. And I just want to thank you guys for being here on this third webinar in the series. Resolute Your Outlook. We are going to be looking at methods of managing your mental health through the new year and beyond. First, I want to introduce who's going to be on the webinar today. We have Regina Story, who's our managing director, and we have Monica Nguyen, Elm's program manager, and we have a very, very special guest, Charles Martinez. Charles, would you introduce yourself and lead us into that mindful moment?
Sure. Thanks, Taylor. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's important webinar. I'm Charles Martinez. A bit about me. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I've been in the health field for about 14 years now. And prior to that, I worked in the nonprofit world. I currently work as a nurse practitioner for Field Trip Health, which is a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy clinic. And for those of you who are not familiar with ketamine, it's a prescription drug used for general anesthesia, but in sub-anesthetic doses, it actually, you can have a profound psychedelic experience or journey, as we call it. And ketamine can help treat people who suffer from treatment-resistant mental health conditions, such as depression, anxiety, and PTSD. So it's a disassociative anesthetic, and the analogy I like to give is people leave their body to look inside the body. And so what studies have shown is that ketamine can actually help create neuroplasticity, which is basically changing or making new neural pathways that can help change the narrative of or relationship to our trauma. What I like to do, I think, before we actually start the webinar is have a mindful moment. I'm not sure where you are in the United States. Maybe you're on the East Coast. Maybe you've just had lunch. Maybe you're feeling a little tired and now you have to sit through a webinar. Or maybe you're on the West Coast and you're just getting your day started. But it really doesn't matter. I think having a moment to just be mindful and ground yourself is always nice. So what I'd like to do is ask you or invite you to either close your eyes or soften your gaze to the ground. But what I want you to do is actually stay sitting in an upright position while we do this. So if you could just take a couple of big, deep breaths for me. And if you have chatter in your brain or things going on, just let it go for the moment. And I want you to take notice of the sounds in the room, the smells of the room. Take notice of where you are in your room. Are you on a chair? Are you on a sofa? And I want you to imagine that there's a string on the top of your head pulling you upright. And I invite you to take notice of the top of your head, moving down to your forehead. Maybe acknowledging your brain, the left and right hemisphere. The right hemisphere that helps with creativity, and the left hemisphere that helps with thoughts and thinking. And as we descend down to our eyes, if your eyes are closed, what do you see behind your eyelids? Maybe there's darkness or patterns like a kaleidoscope or images. It really doesn't matter. And as we move down to our nose, feeling the cool air going into your nose and the warm air coming out. Knowing that every breath you take is feeding your brain, your heart, your spirit. And as we move down to your mouth, softening your lips, taking notice of inside of your mouth, maybe how it tastes, because we're intentional about everything outside and inside of our body. And if your tongue is on your palate, on the roof of your mouth, relax it. Relaxing your jaw. And as we descend down to our neck, and if you feel called to rotate your neck up and down, side to side, you can. Moving down to our shoulders, letting gravity pull them down, relaxing your shoulders. Moving down to our chest where our heart lives. And if you feel called to touch your heart, you can. Placing your hand or hands on your heart. Noticing the beats of your heart. Or taking notice of the rise and fall of your breath. Moving down to our abdomen, where our digestive system lives and our vital organs that help us process food and filter. Taking notice of your upper extremities, moving down to your hips and your lower back and your glutes. Taking notice of where you're sitting right now. And if your mind wanders, that's fine. Just come back to my voice, come back to your breath. You can tell yourself, I'm going to take an arriving breath and inhale deeply and exhale. Moving down to the lower extremities. And just knowing that you're grounded right now. Breathing into the lower half of your body, where the root chakra lives. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes, come back to the room, come back to my voice. All right. Thank you for taking that pause. It's always nice to have a nice pause throughout the day. I have a friend, her name is Claudia Catarucci. She's one of my mentors, and she always says, she coined the term pause for possibility. So you can always just take a pause for possibility. So, yeah.
Thank you, Charles. And yes, I definitely took a pause for a moment to reflect and very much more into a calm feeling and for that mindful moment. So today we're going to cover 5 methods. First, we're going to look at the role of nutrition in your body, the role of nutrition in your mind and your mood. Then we're going to look at healthy boundaries, identify and manage stress and anxiety and depression. So you'll be able to hone in on which, is it stress, is it anxiety or depression? We're going to look at reframing your outlook into a more positive manner and really take in gratitude. We're also going to look at being realistic with yourself for the New Year's and beyond. So anxiety and depression are among the most concerning health concerns worldwide right now. And the WHO actually is expecting in 2030 that it will be one of the top health concerns in the world. It's also well established that nutrition plays a fundamental role in mental health. So an emerging area of research now, because of this, is nutritional psychiatry. And it specifically looks at the relationship of the nutrition in the development and treatment of mental problems. So like an expensive car, as I think my body's an expensive car, I need to put in premium fuel, right? So we need to, as everybody says, eat healthier, more whole foods, but also foods that are high in vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, because this will help nourish the body and protect it from just breathing. The oxidative stress actually damages your cells. So in our Western diets here in the US, we have been kind of conforming to the fast food, highly processed and high sugar content food. And this gives a risk of depression compared to other diets around the world. So let's look at this a little bit. Studies have compared the traditional Mediterranean and the traditional Japanese diet that is full of high fruits and vegetables, unprocessed grains. We're looking at fish and seafood with a moderate amount of lean meat and also dairy. Us in Western cultures have been accustomed to highly processed food and sugar. Well, when they looked at these two diets, they found that 25 to 30% of the traditional Mediterranean and Japanese diets, the people that consume those, had lower depression, which is absolutely huge. Why? Well, because of inflammation. And these chemicals that they use to process the food and the sugar can actually lead to inflammation in your body, which then again slows down the system with your expensive luxury car, which is your body, not having the premium fuel. So there's also a very close relationship in your emotions to what your brain and also to the gastrointestinal tract, which is now called and referred to as the second brain. Why? Well, because these studies have shown that increase in hyperactivity and depression are from those preservatives that they find in these foods, food colorings and additives. These are all working against you, right? So let's start paying attention on how eating differently makes you feel, right? Not just in that moment, but in the next day. So did you choose to have a salad or a burger? Did you decide to grab that highly sugary coffee in the morning or maybe a tea? Try that out. I'm telling you, your body and your mood will respond to what you have, what you're intaking through your mouth. Now, what do we eat? Well, fiber is excellent. Why? Because it actually helps absorb sucrose, which is sugar, right? And it absorbs it and then it processes it slower than just taking sugar by itself. You can find this in fruits and vegetables, nutrient-filled carbs like whole grains and beans. Then we also have antioxidants. Well, we've all heard about how antioxidants have reduced inflammation, and this happens in your gut. It starts in your gut. So berries, leafy greens, even turmeric. Then folate, which is vitamin B, which helps dopamine production. We're going to talk about dopamine and how the brain responds to dopamine just a little bit later. But you can find this dopamine production vitamin in leafy greens, lentils, and cantaloupes. So vitamin D, it's a source of production for serotonin. You get that from sunlight, but we also can get it from mushrooms. So it's very good to incorporate that as best you can, or be out in the sun and get that vitamin D from the sun. Magnesium is an essential mineral, and it helps everything from the nerve and muscle function. But it also has a vital connection between food and your mood connection. These can find in almonds, cashews, and spinach, leafy greens, bananas, and beans. And we can't forget about fermented fruit. These fermented foods. These are packed with probiotics. This live bacteria is good for your digestive tract. This will help absorb these vital minerals and vitamins to sustain that positive, to sustain a positive mood. I'd like to introduce Charles back in for our section 2.
Charles, you are muted.
I am so sorry. I've been talking this whole time. So thank you, Taylor, for that for that piece on nutrition. It's very important and relates to boundaries, even moving into boundaries. What we do in our life as far as who we hang out with, what we put into our body is all about boundaries. And so I wanted to start by talking about how boundaries are very important to our own self-care and to our mental health. And so the first step to feeling respected, right, and safe in your own space is knowing the rights and building those boundaries. So the first one I have listed here is just to feel safe in a relationship. Safety is really important. Having the privacy and boundaries that you've created that are respected. So having that respect for that, to be heard and listened to be and feel validated. Even if it's just an affirmation, telling your loved one, thank you for doing the dishes, right? To respect that the answer no means no. And I have a slide on saying no. And I think it's really important, that word. And I'll tell you why in a few minutes. To have your needs met is also very important. Next slide. So examples of boundaries is the saying no without guilt or shadow contracts. A friend of mine, Claudia, who I talked about a minute ago, coined that term shadow contracts. And lots of people always ask, well, what is a shadow contract? And I like to give the example that a shadow contract is basically saying, perhaps a friend invited you out for dinner and you really want to say no, but then you're feeling guilty. So then you end up saying yes, right? So a shadow contract would be, I'm only hanging out with my friend because I feel guilty, right? So having that intention of feeling into your own body on how you feel when you want to do something is really important. So saying no is important. Taking responsibility for your own actions and emotions, feeling supported by loved ones, not feeling responsible for other people's emotions, right? So I think a lot of people, especially if you're empathic or an empath, as we call it, can feel other people's energy and feelings. So if the person you're hanging out with feels angry or sad, you're taking on their emotion. So it's really important to create that boundary and not take on other people's energy and other people's emotions. And then stating physical boundaries, literally distancing yourself from people that maybe make you feel uncomfortable, or even in a meeting and someone's talking too close to you, just kind of like stepping back. Using assertive language to state and maintain your boundaries is really important. So, assertive language is clear and non-negotiable. I like to think of assertiveness as kind of like the middle ground between being aggressive and passive. I think assertiveness is a way that you can go about by using I statements. Perhaps a boss is, your employer or your boss is telling you something that makes you feel uncomfortable. Perhaps saying, I'm feeling a certain way because you're putting words in my mouth, right? You can still be assertive and remain kind and respected. So assertiveness is a really great way of establishing a boundary. As you can see, I gave you some examples. It earns people's respect. It increases your own self-esteem. It can reduce anxiety and stress within. Learning to say no. So this is really, really important because no is a complete sentence. It's okay to say no. And you don't have to, give a reason for saying no. So if someone's inviting you to a holiday party and in your body, your body, you should listen to your body a little bit more, because your body can actually tell you the answer before your brain does. That's the somatic piece. Listen, perhaps, you very similar to the analogy of walking down, a dark alley, and, the hairs in the back of your neck stand up, and then your brain tells you to run. So if someone asks you to do something and it doesn't feel comfortable and you say no, and your stomach starts to hurt or your heart starts racing, the answer is probably no, right? So learning to listen to that and not having to give justification to why you're saying no. So your support team is really important. Reaching out to people who can help you create boundaries, like a therapist, a social worker, a psychiatrist, psychiatric nurse practitioners, somebody that can actually help integrate the experience that you're feeling or having. So what are the benefits of healthy boundaries, right? Setting and maintaining boundaries will help you conserve your emotional energy, but also it can put you in a better mental state. So, tune into how you're feeling, right? Listening to your body. Running from social media drama can help create some boundaries. I think a lot of us have these social media apps and looking at reels, and sometimes it can be really negative. So setting those boundaries, perhaps start searching more for positivity, and then you'll start seeing the positive reels come in. Paying attention to your body signal, what I just spoke about, that stomach starting to hurt when you're feeling uncomfortable, that headache you're getting when you feel stressed, listening to your body and taking that pause for possibility and staying curious and open-minded. Relationships. For me, relationships is number one. So choosing people in your life that bring you joy and growth and happiness and even curiosity. And I think it's okay to have different points of views, different relationships, different opinions, but are those people that you're bringing into your circle, into your inner circle, are they going to bring you these four things? And it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can just be that. Having an open mind where people want to actually help you grow in your life journey and you help them grow in their life journey. So this is a good segue into stress, anxiety, and depression. And it's kind of just a basic 101 course on what this is. There's lots of nuances and information that goes along with stress, anxiety, and depression, but I'm only going to just touch base on the differences of these issues. So the first one is stress, right? So what is stress? We all have stress, right? It's your body's reaction to a trigger, and it's generally a short-term experience. So it's transient. It's not, it comes and goes. Perhaps you're stressed for a project at work, project is done, and then you're not stressed anymore. That could be stress, right? And there could be positive and negative stress. Negative would be what I just mentioned, you're stressed at work because of a project. A positive stress could be, I'm going on vacation with my family, I need to pack, all that stuff. So that's the difference. And it's our response to threat, right? Our fight or flight, our sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, when you're feeling triggered, you want to get things done, right? That's fight or flight. So symptoms of stress are good to know. So you can have physiological symptoms, then you can have emotional symptoms. So physiological symptoms would be like your headaches, your back and neck pain, maybe chest pain, feeling your hands or feet are sweaty. You feel your heart rate, rapidly beating, or you're feeling overwhelmed. You're actually feeling that heaviness in your spirit. Other symptoms could be just quieting your mind, difficulty concentrating, and just kind of staying still and present in your mind. And then low energy and loss of sexual desire. All those could be signs of stress. So how do we cope with stress? What are ways to cope with stress? People have different ways of doing that. I know for me, I like to exercise. I like to meditate. I like taking, long walks or even going for a run. But what, you can find that for yourself. Sometimes people like the music, going to a spa, getting a massage. Perhaps there's, hobbies that they'd like to do. So finding your way that helps you cope is really important. Maybe it's journals, maybe it's painting, drawing, but knowing the things that can help you keep your stress level down is really important on how to cope with your stress. So different people have different triggers, right? Your trigger may not trigger me, and the triggers that I have may not trigger you. So I think being intentional and aware of what your triggers are is very important. One thing I really like to do is deep breathe. If you take some big deep breaths, physiologically, it will actually lower your blood pressure. It'll lower your heart rate. I like to do the in through my mouth, out through my mouth. So if you take a big deep breath for 4 seconds and you hold it for 4 and exhale for 4, you will actually start to feel your body calm. Because physiologically, it's actually really, decreasing that heart rate. It's decreasing that blood pressure. It's filling that oxygen into your lungs. And just taking a big deep breath feels good. So it's always good to just go back to your breath and acknowledge your breath. Some people, like I mentioned, practice mindfulness, like mindful meditation. And I think meditation, people are a little intimidated by that word. There are plenty of apps out there that you can download and you can do. Some of them are free. Some of them will give you a month free. Like the Calm app, I love. They have stories. They have adult bedtime stories that can help you fall asleep. There's the Breathe app, and that's not a typo. It's actually spelled BREETHE. There's Insight Timer and Headspace. These are just apps that are guided. So it's a guided meditation. So some people think that meditation is just in a quiet room saying Om, right? That's passive meditation, which helps. But then there's active meditation where you can basically drop in the moment, even when you're driving, right? And try to let go of that moment. That's a whole other webinar that I can talk about on mindfulness meditation practices. But another way of mindful practice could be just a walk outdoors, setting aside whatever's stressing you out and just going for a walk. And of course, yoga. People love yoga. Another way is keeping a journal, writing down your experiences every day. You'll figure out what works for you. I'll be transparent. I really don't like to journal. I choose to be a little more active. But I think it is nice to jot things down so you can always go back to it and integrate what you're feeling. Now, moving into anxiety, which is a little different from stress, and I'll tell you the reasons and why. So anxiety is a sustained mental hygiene issue that can be triggered by stress. It doesn't fade away like stress does once the threat is in the past. So there's the difference. Anxiety lasts longer. It's not transient like stress. Anxiety can cause significant impairment in our workplace, in our areas of living, with our relationships, colleagues, friends, loved ones. Some symptoms of anxiety kind of similar to stress, difficulty controlling worry, restlessness or feeling keyed up on edge, feeling irritable all the time, difficulty concentrating. And then the physiological would be like the sleep disturbance, the joint pains, the muscle pains, the headaches, the chest pain, even shortness of breath. Getting anxious can actually put you in a state of feeling like you can't catch your breath. And like I just mentioned, the difference is that one's transient, stress is transient, and anxiety lasts longer, right? So anxiety can cause an array of symptoms, and it is noted as the most common mental health issue in the US today. So affecting, as you can see, 40 million adults. So what are ways that you can kind of keep that anxiety at bay or just even help treat it? Daily exercise. Why does that help? Actually daily exercise can actually create good humors because it's actually dilating your vessels. It's creating more oxygen that can go to the brain. It creates higher levels of dopamine and serotonin. Having good sleep, at least getting 7-8 hours of sleep. I know it's really hard sometimes when we have kids and all that, but being intentional on how you can get that. And like Taylor mentioned, eating healthy, eating super, super important. So what we put into our body, right, will have a direct impact on our health. Having a high sugar and carb content can be really tricky because it does, like Taylor said, induce inflammation. There was a study that came out with people who had Alzheimer's disease, and specifically the ApoE4 gene, which is the two variants that define Alzheimer's. And studies have proven that if you can exercise, so don't be sedentary. So exercise at least 30 minutes a day, whether that's just walking for 30 minutes a day, keeping your diet low in sugar and gluten. Gluten is a big factor in inflammation, not just with celiac disease. It showed that you can keep those genes dormant, and we'll talk a little bit more about the genes. And then avoiding caffeine and alcohol, because caffeine and alcohol, obviously, caffeine can stimulate ourselves, right? So you want to just kind of be careful with that. So how do we cope with anxiety? Just like the last few slides with stress, seeking help with counseling. Medication can help with anxiety. So, we have SSRIs like Prozac, Zoloft, Celexa, right? So what are SSRIs? It's a medication that increases the serotonin in our brain, right? And what's serotonin? Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. And so it's a messenger, it's a chemical messenger that carries signals between nerve cells to our brain. So sometimes we're not getting enough serotonin. So that's why people need to go on medications to help with their anxiety. And obviously nutrition, like Taylor talked about. So what's depression, right? So now what's the difference with depression? So depression is a medical condition that affects your mood and ability to function. These symptoms can be very similar to our other, to stress and anxiety. The thing with depression is people do feel lower mood. They feel sad. They feel hopeless. They can have, anxiety, depression. They have trouble thinking sometimes, even being forgetful, or maybe overeating or undereating, or oversleeping or undersleeping. And so the diagnosis for major depressive disorder is actually done by a professional, by a medical health professional, whether it be your primary care physician, your psychiatrist, psychologist. They will give you a proper diagnosis. And how common is depression? So it's estimated that nearly 7% of American adults have depression every year. So more than 16% of US adults. So that's pretty significant. 1 in 6 will experience depression in their lifetime. And there's many types of depression. I only listed 4 here, but I mean, there's 10 or 11 actual diagnoses, maybe even more. But as you can see, major depressive disorder, perinatal and postpartum depression, women who have premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which can cause depression, and then seasonal affective disorder, especially like in this season. It's winter time. The sun sets sooner, it gets darker sooner, it's cold, so people can actually feel that depression. So it's all season based. And like we just mentioned earlier, just these are the symptoms. We kind of already mentioned them, so you can go to the next slide, Monica. Thank you. What causes depression? Many things can cause depression. So the chemistry in our brain that we talked about, the serotonin levels, genetics, life events, medical conditions, like if you were diagnosed with a terminal illness, or maybe diagnosed with an illness that may have a long-term treatment plan. Medications can also cause depression. And like I just mentioned earlier, it is diagnosed by a healthcare provider. We use different tools to help diagnose. So in addition to symptoms and the duration of the symptoms, we also have different evaluation forms that we have clients or patients fill out. One is called the PHQ-9 assessment, and it'll determine if they're, it'll help us determine if they are truly depressed. Other things too that we want to rule out, it's good to mention, is our lab work, right? So if we have low vitamin B12 or vitamin D deficiency, that can actually impact our mood, or our thyroid levels can actually impact our mood. So it's always good to get a full panel done before, every provider would do this, is to get your blood work done just to make sure that it's not hormonal, like if it is true depression. And similarly to anxiety, how is it treated? Counseling, some people do self-help modalities. Some people will do medication, like we talked about, the Zoloft, the Proloct, the SSRIs or the SNRIs. Alternative medicine, so like I talked about with ketamine, ketamine can help people change the narrative and the relationship of their trauma. Where we put them into this altered state of consciousness, where they actually, can go inside and see where maybe their trauma is. That's a whole other webinar I would love to do at some point. If you have questions, shoot me an email. You can get in touch with Taylor, and they can make that happen. But ketamine has been really, really a great modality that we're seeing in our clinic, helping people change the relationship of their trauma. And then brain stimulation, like ECT, it's the electroconvulsive therapy. Also TMS, it's that transcranial magnetic stimulation. So some people choose to use those modalities as well, especially if medications aren't helping, if they're treatment resistant, they'll go to alternative medicines or brain stimulation therapy. So who's at risk for depression? We all are. None of us are immune to depression. It can happen to anybody at any time, no matter of their age, their gender, or their circumstance. Studies show that women may experience depression more often than men. Can it be prevented? I think yes. Just like autoimmune diseases, we can prevent it by having a healthy lifestyle, right? So getting enough sleep, practicing self-care activities like meditation, like going for walks, yoga, stuff like that. And if you've had depression before, you are more likely to experience it again. That's why it's really good to know your body and being intentional on what you do to your body, inside and out. So what you put inside your body, who you surround yourself with, your environment, all that takes can be a positive thing for preventing depression. What's the outlook for people with depression? There has been research found that on average, individuals with a prior mental disorder diagnosis develop dementia more than 5 years earlier than those without. So even stuff like dementia, right? Depression can actually speed up the onset of that. Depression can be mild and severe, and it can be brief and long lasting. So it's important to get help right away if you are experiencing these symptoms. Depression can lead to self-harm or death. And we just saw yesterday, I'm not sure if you saw the news, Stephen Boss, also known as Twitch. He was, I think he was notably famous for being the DJ on Ellen DeGeneres show. He lost his life to suicide yesterday. So, seeking help is super important. And also just being intentional with getting the help that you need if you are feeling these symptoms. So what can you do if you have depression? There's some resources out there, tons of resources. They're listed here. When in doubt, 911, right? So now I want to move into more of a positive outlook and how we can maintain our health and well-being, right? Mind, body, spirit. I thought this was an interesting study that I found that pessimistic people had nearly 20% higher risk of dying over a 30-year period than those who were optimistic. People who keep track of their gratitude can actually help keep yourself positive, whether that's writing in a journal or, talking to somebody about being grateful for something. So changing the narrative, this is a really important slide, because Claudia Caterucci, my mentor, she coined the term, she really talks about changing our language on how we say things. So I think you need to hit next slide, Monica. Sorry. Yeah, there you go. A lot of people say, well, you should make a habit of doing this, make a habit of doing that. And it's hard, right? Habits are, it sounds more of like a negative term than a positive term, but switching that language to ritual, like having a ritual every morning, whether that's going for a walk, dancing silly for 30 seconds, praying, doing yoga, meditation, whatever you want to create as your ritual, I think is really important to have a positive outlook on your life, and also choosing your words wisely. So instead of saying, I want this, I want that, I want this, want has this negative connotation of lust to it, right? It feels very lustful. But if you change that language to having, so instead of saying, I want to feel at peace, maybe say, I will have peace, right? Because when you change that language, want to have, I will have peace sounds a little more attainable and achievable than saying, I want peace. So just changing just the language can help change the narrative. Talking about our genes, going back to our genes, how we can actually keep our genes dormant, like the ApoE4 gene, the study that was done, where people ended up changing their diets, cutting out the sugar, cutting out the carbohydrates, and cutting out the processed foods. And, having a well-balanced diet, exercising, meditating, even just the positive thinking can actually keep your genes dormant. I think that's a really important slide to just take in, because just the small things that we can do that isn't going to cost us any money can actually change our narrative and change that gene. How else can you stay positive? Just write about positive future, right? What does that mean? Just setting aside time so you can go into detail of what you want for yourself. What will you have? There was a researcher by the name of Laura King, who actually proved this exercise as a great mood booster, where she had people write 20 minutes for 4 consecutive days, only positive things. Writing a gratitude letter has always helped folks. I know I've done that, just being grateful for things that I have, and just giving out my gratitude, whether it's on a journal or a letter or to the universe or to our God, whoever we believe in. And then just reminding yourself to savor that, really savor that. Yeah, these are just great ways on how you can increase gratefulness in your life. And then share the good news, share it with a friend, a family member, by keeping all that in, that can actually be a negative thing too, right? Releasing the good news is as important as releasing the negative energy. So I like to think that we're kind of like a boomerang, a recycling being where, it's good to let out our negative emotions, but also let out our positive so we can keep filtering that. So avoid negative thinking. So this is really important because avoiding dwelling on the downers. I always tell my friends, I always think of that SNL skit with Debbie Downer, everybody's having a good time at a party and she comes in and she just throws a bomb on it. So avoiding those dwelling on the downer. So staying more upbeat, positive. I know it's hard. It's not always realistic. But just being intentional that you are being a downer actually can change that narrative, right? Change that point. So if you're intentional about what you're feeling, even though you're feeling down, but you can name that and ask yourself, can I let that go just for the moment so I can be present with the people that I'm with? You'll feel yourself starting to get lighter. Changing unhealthy self-talk is important. Not always talking yourself down from a situation that you think that you can't do. Consider alternative explanations. I'll go ahead. It's okay. You can switch the slide. Yeah. So the Meridian Body. I love this slide. Because the meridian, so in Eastern medicine, like acupuncture, they always talk about the chi. So how we can keep our vertical line intact, right? So what does that mean? So the meridian is like the energetic highway in our body, mind, body, spirit. So if you can think of this vertical line that can be aligned with peace and abundance and courageousness, right? Then our horizontal plane, all our relationships, our job, everything outside of our body will actually be intact. And you can have, or it's a way of maintaining stability. So if you're stable here, then your horizontal plane will be stable. So that's why I like this slide. So it comes from within first before we can actually have positive relationships. And then our surrounding, right? Surrounding ourselves with people that bring us joy or curiosity or growth. Interesting enough, I saw yesterday a reel of Oprah Winfrey, and she talked about, I'll paraphrase this. She says something like, you need to surround yourself with people who are going to stimulate, inspire, and lift you up. And if those people can take away your energy, those energy vampires, then listen to your body. If you're feeling drained from someone, listen to your body. Then they're not for you at that moment. So surrounding yourself with people or things that will stimulate you in a positive way, you'll see it'll go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. That was wonderful material and very valuable education and content. So thank you so much for your dedication and passion and for your practice of helping people. Now we move on to the ritual of New Year's resolutions and being realistic and intentional. So interesting, at least a quarter of people typically make at least one New Year's resolution, and a large portion of those good intentions end in disappointment. So on average, 9 to 12% of individuals feel they were successful in keeping their resolutions. So let's look at the common reasons of why such a high percentage of failed resolutions. It's unrealistic goals, failed or didn't keep track of their progress, forgot about their resolutions, and then just too many. January 1st should be no better than any other day to make a life change or adapt a new ritual. So why do we put this needless pressure on ourselves to upgrade our lives at the opening of the new calendar? The reason why we put the pressure on ourselves is referred to as the fresh start effect. Psychologists have studied that we as individuals, rather than seeing our life as a continuum, we tend to craft a narrative, dividing into separate chapters that mark different stages of our life. So let's look at the pearl narrative. You are the one that puts the next pearl on the string. Inside the pearl may be a dark circle, but don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about that. What's important is forward motion, and one task equals one pearl. The way you frame your resolutions could make a really important difference. Craft approach goals versus avoidance goals. And if you do this simple ritual, you are 25% more likely to meet approach goals than avoidance goals. So instead of stopping things, start doing things. If you create New Year's resolutions, and by chance they end up, quote unquote, not good or failure, that is not the goal. It's the process of you keep going and are the one that puts the next pearl on the string. So keep adding to your string of pearls. So in conclusion, we've gone over the 5 methods. Nutrition, being aware of the correlation of your food intake and the impacts on your mind health. Boundaries, taking on the responsibility and create boundaries. Be assertive and choose relationships that bring you joy, happiness, growth, and of course, curiosity. Stress, anxiety, and depression. We discussed the symptoms of each and coping mechanisms. Positive outlook. Change your narrative and create rituals, not habits, and avoid negative thinking. And 5th, be realistic. It's about forward motion, adding to your string of pearls and your journey continuum with realistic and approach goals versus avoidance goals. Now we move on to the Q&A section where we'll have Monica lead us.
Thank you, Regina. Hello, everyone. So I do have a couple of questions. I believe we're waiting on Charles to. There you are, and you're muted. I can't hear you. Okay, so in the event that an individual has, tried everything to therapy to exercising and, something, it just doesn't seem to help. What would you recommend, Charles?
Well, I think the first thing is I would invite the person to obviously I think therapy or a coach or something, if they haven't tried that, trying to figure out why nothing is working, right? Digging deep inside and asking yourself, well, why isn't it working? Really asking yourself that question. I know that some people in the modality that we use in our clinic, ketamine, right? Trying a different modality like psychedelic therapy, like ketamine, can maybe find the reason to certain things, like the analogy I mentioned, leaving your body to look inside, like really look inside. I know some people come in with all these grandiose intentions, and a modality like ketamine can actually bring up a subconscious intention that was buried deep down. So I hope I answered your question.
Okay, one more. Well, not one more, but I think this one's a very important one as well. Is how does a loved one, how can a loved one support anybody that may be going through difficulties during this, stressful time during the holidays? Just being there and being able to support somebody. How would you recommend, somebody who doesn't really suffer from, mental illness, or, somebody that's on the outside that can't really, understand what they're going through?
I think listening is a really important skill to have, especially with your family members, is taking that, first of all, taking the time for that family member, being intentional about your time with them, and listening, truly listening to what they may be screaming for. Just like the example I gave with, that Stephen Boss, Twitch, we saw him as a happy guy, an entertainer. Who would have thought that he, had a mental illness? And I think people who commit suicide, that there is something deep down that they're in apathy, right? They are in complete apathy. And so, finding ways to engage with your loved ones, whether, I know I have some clients who, they have a hard time talking to their kids, but if they actually get involved in their activities, like playing a video game while they talk with them, going for a walk, especially with like young adults, they want to be moving all the time. So maybe going for a walk with your teenager, or going on a hike with the teenager, and actually ask the questions and just be there for them, and be intentional just with time and listening, and find creative ways on how you can get into their world.
That's very helpful. I would say I'm going to use that during the holidays to, and then how would you, do you have any tips to prepare for the holiday season? Just with everybody gathering these days, there could be some aches that whenever you go to your families, you're like, oh, well, I know what triggers me there. And just avoiding that, and being able to navigate, the stressful time and preparing for it.
That's a great question, Monica. And the simplest answer is pause. Like, take a pause. So intentions is so important, right? You have to be intentional about everything. And if you know that going into this family dynamic may trigger you, big, deep breaths, pausing for that possibility, right? Always pause for possibility, and being intentional about staying curious. Perhaps you and your cousin are on different sides of the political spectrum, right? So I think we often, our society, we have this war vibe all the time, right? It's black versus white, it's left versus right, it's France versus Argentina, right? So we're the World Cup. So we're always in this war vibe, right? So and oftentimes we don't actually step back and understand where people are coming from. So it's okay to have a difference of opinion, but staying open-minded and curious to where maybe their narrative or idea came from. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree with it, but taking that pause to just listen, right? So going into a family dynamic, big deep breaths, pausing, and staying open-minded, and letting go of your old narrative of what has triggered you in the past, right? Even if it's just for that moment.
That's very helpful. Well, that's about all the questions that I have today. Did you guys have anything with Charles' amazing presentation today, Taylor or Regina? Or would like to add anything with tips?
No, I think it was great. And we appreciate everyone's time. And it's definitely been a pleasure and valuable opportunity to present and be a part of this amazing organization and association. And please, keep in mind the resources available. If you want to move to the next slide, Monica, by Amputee Coalition, and of course their app and the upgrade, and then obviously the peer visits, support group, all the available resources they bring to their members, and then of course NAMI. which is available. And this is recorded and archived for future listening. And to all the panelists and Anna Maria and V3 Coalition, we appreciate you all. And have a wonderful holiday season, New Year's and beyond.
Happy holidays and happy New Year.
Bye, everybody.
Yes. Happy holidays all.